7?
It was right about this time, a little after.
Good. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to City Council. Today is Monday, November 19th, 2018. I'm Sally Bagshaw, Chair of this Budget Committee, and I welcome you here. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Mosqueda, Councilmember Juarez, and Councilmember Shama Sawant. Councilmember Gonzalez has just come around the corner, so we've got a good quorum here, and we're going to dive right into public comment. We've got a full schedule, as many of you know. We're going to be doing the final council votes on the budget, and consequently, we are really going to abide by the 20 minutes of public comment time that we have proposed. So we've got only five people signed up. I'm going to ask you to stick with the 2-minute time frame. It is 10:32 right now, so at 2 minutes after 11, I will move on to the agenda. So if I can ask John Perkins, Alicia Glenwell, Kelly Larson to approach the microphones, and each of you will have 2 minutes. Thank you for coming.
Good morning.
And
John Perkins.
John, if you want to, the other one's taller. You might be more comfortable there.
Oh, that's better. Thank
Yeah.
you. Restart.
Yeah.
If
you want, give him that 1 second.
Good morning. It's a great opportunity when I get a chance to thank the City Council, particularly Councilmember O'Brien and Herbald, who's here in Extension, and the rest of you for acknowledging the development of the neutral offsetting benefit lease transfer to Bird Bar Place, Central Area Senior Center, and Greenwood Senior Center. I have written commentary here. I usually try to keep it to 1 page front and back, but I broke my rule because on Sunday I did a transcript of your conversation about this. So that's in here, plus the resolution, plus the 2 green sheets that I had on Sunday. So this is a little package that you don't have to scatter around and look for many things. It's all right here. I just want to finish with my last sort of minute or so that deep down, there's also the state involved with this. It didn't show up in your conversation last week, but the funds began with Referendum 29. And so Referendum 29 was one that was brought forward in 1972. It was actually a divided governor legislator. One was Republican, the other one was Democrat. And it came to the citizens. The citizens voted it in. The majority vote, I think, was 60-40 in the final results. And those funds were the majority funds that were used for the Referendum 29 properties. So I have a note here with a reference on where that can be located. The legislature checked back in 2006. They revised an RCW, and in that revision, they said if these funds were used for a particular property, that local jurisdictions can turn those over to the operating nonprofits for no further consideration, which means, to my limited legal understanding, you don't have to charge free. So I think that's really important, I think, to keep that present because the legislature expressed our interest 12 years ago. Yes, do this, turn it over. If it has to be transferred back out again for whatever reason, please make sure the purposes to Referendum 29 want it continue.
Thank you, John.
Footnotes for all of that.
Alicia, and then Kelly, and then Allison.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Alicia Glenwell. I'm with the Coalition Ending Gender-Based Violence, and I'm here speaking on behalf of over 40 member organizations working to prevent and end domestic and sexual violence in Seattle and King County. First, I want to recognize Councilmember Gonzalez for her leadership in first championing the restoration of funds for sexual assault survivors, legal representation for sexual assault survivors, initially cut in the mayor's proposed budget. Thank you for your strong, consistent support of survivors in our city. Thank you as well to Council Members Mosqueda and Harold and Herbold for your sponsorship of these critical funds throughout the budget process. These funds enable the provider agency to represent survivors who work or live in Seattle for their protection order, immigration, criminal, housing, and Title IX cases at a time of record demand on our region's sexual assault programs. We recognize every council member for protecting these funds with your vote on the final budget today. Preventing these proposed cuts was critical, but it wasn't enough, isn't enough. Investments are needed to keep existing service levels stable in our increasingly expensive city. We encourage and appreciate you all working with Councilmember Mosqueda, working toward creative solutions to adjust all Human Service Department contracts for inflation. You have the power to take meaningful steps to ensure everyone can reach their full potential in our city. Today, we recognize you for restoring losses to existing services, and we thank you for investing in solutions at the scale of the challenges our communities are facing. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Alicia. Kelly, Allison, and then Katie.
Hi, Kelly Larson with Plymouth Housing. I'm here representing all of our workers and our leadership team to thank Councilmember Mosqueda for your leadership on this human services wage challenge we face. Thanks to all of you for your support hearing from our extraordinary workers over the last several months and many more that they represent. You would be in awe of their work if you could witness it for yourself. The compassion and the skill they bring to our most vulnerable citizens every hour of every single day. We strongly support the 2% contract adjustment, and we ask for your commitment to a long-term effort to radically improve compensation for some of our city's most important workers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. Allison, and then Katie Garrow.
Good morning, council members. Allison Eisinger with the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness. I am here as well to thank you for the work that each of you has done and for the work that you are doing together to help us not go further down a path of underfunding the forgotten first responders, our human services workers. I am deeply grateful to Council Members Mosqueda and O'Brien for their leadership and recognition of these issues, and to all 9 of you for acknowledging that we need to take this first step and we need to apply a 2% inflation adjustment across all human services contracts. It is, of course, unfair and unconscionable to offer an inflation adjustment to some but not all contracted service providers. And I want to thank you in advance for what we are all going to need to do together to ensure that this city responds to the needs of the people of Seattle by supporting those who are charged with doing the most important work that stabilizes and ensures a healthy community, just as we have seen the state do by investing after many years of inadequate investment in our educators, just as this city has done by investing in wage increases for police officers. You know and we know that it is imperative that the city's budget reflects similar commitments to investing in the people who care for seniors, children, youth, people with disabilities, people with chronic health conditions, and those without homes. So I thank you for what you are doing to make this a fairer budget, and I look forward to working with all of you towards a resolution that will address this and, of course, bring us towards the point of investing in the housing that we all know is really at the heart of the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Katie? Hi.
Good morning, council members. My name is Katie Garrow. I'm the Deputy Director at MLK Labor, representing 100,000 workers in 150 different affiliate unions. I'm here today to support a cost of living increase for service providers who are contracted with the City of Seattle, and say thank you to Councilmember Mosqueda and to all of you for recognizing this important adjustment. I also want to thank you for your support of the SPOG contract last week, which was also an important investment in frontline workers' wage increases. Many of the workers who will see wage increases as a result of this budget item are young women with master's degrees earning $16 an hour, as you well know. Many of them are my good friends. Before I ever worked in the union movement, I was a social worker at a nonprofit hiring hall in San Francisco. I made minimum wage, and I had a bachelor's degree. I know how difficult it is to fight in this field for yourself when you see the harrowing poverty and violent oppression that your clients face. But I think that really fighting for a wage increase in this field is the right thing to do for our clients and for the most vulnerable members of our community, because an economy that's built around not paying service providers and teachers the wages that they deserve is unjust. I left my job in San Francisco after 18 months because I couldn't afford to provide for my family in the way that I needed to in that field. But if we had been, if I had taken up the fight in the way that these workers are taking up this fight, maybe I'd have stayed in the field longer. Like many service providers in this industry, I'm a millennial, and millennials are the first generation in American history who will not do better than our parents. I want to thank you for addressing this inequity because we may stand a fighting chance at correcting that outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Is anybody else signed up? Okay, well, that's going to end our public comment, but I really want to say thank you, John, Alicia, Katie, Allison, Kelly, all of you who have been here, who have consistently come, who send us your comments. And I appreciate the very positive nature of how you've come together with us. And I look forward as well to working with you in 2019 to see how much more we can solve and the revenues that we need to really tackle the housing crisis we've all been talking about. So before we move into consideration today for our agenda, I want to just remind everybody up here that down there, Allison and Patty will be tallying our votes again, so be sure to raise your hand and when we have both votes for aye and nay. And I will caution myself to pay attention to what I'm voting for. And make sure that all these votes are captured. And I do, again, want to say thank you to Council Central staff. You guys are stars. I appreciate all that you've done. And I mentioned Jeff this morning that thank you for all the work that you did over your Sunday, just helping us get together the numbers that we needed for this sugary beverage task discussion, which will come up as item number 4 here. So with that, I'd like to move adoption of the agenda.
Second.
Okay. So are there any comments? Any amendments today? If not, those in favor of adopting the agenda, vote aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we are moving on. So what we're going to be doing today is to consider the budget actions that we need to complete the development of our 2019-2020 budget package. We do have a handful of outstanding policy items that we brought up on our Wednesday night meeting and a few technical corrections and the green sheets that will approve the budget and the ordinances themselves. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to ask Eric to walk us through the first item of business and how this is going to work, because I will, after he speaks to it, I'm going to move it. I'll need a second. We'll have comments, and if the sponsor or the originating duo or trio of the underlying green sheet wants to speak to it, great. Otherwise, we can just move it and adopt it. Okay, Eric, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Bagshot, members of the committee. I'm Eric Sund of your central staff, and agenda item 1 is green sheet 1-11A1. This is a fairly technical item. It doesn't actually appropriate any money or change any legislation. It merely takes into account for technical purposes for the revenue forecast that that the proposed budget will spend against. The remaining revenue that is expected to be collected as a result of action taken on Wednesday to approve green sheet 30-4B1, which recommend do not pass Council Bill 119377, reestablishing a business license tax or B&O tax deduction for life sciences research income. That recognized $150,000 of the $900,000 over the biennium, and so this will basically put into the ledger the remaining funds.
All right, so would you just clarify what the vote means? Because last time we had a little difficulty. So an aye vote is and a nay vote is.
So up for consideration is the approval of this green sheet. An aye vote will simply adopt this green sheet and have it filed in the clerk file, and all of the necessary documents for the this afternoon's council action will be adjusted to reflect the additional revenue here. And a no vote would mean not recognizing that revenue and would, against which the next few items are making calls by approving expenditures. So.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you for that, and to acknowledge Mark Cummings and other in the life sciences of Washington, both the organization people who have called us. We recognize fully that this is not their first choice. I also want to recognize the importance of their work, not just to our community, but across the nation and internationally. We also recognize that the state legislature is going to be hopefully stepping up, assisting us with making the kind of exemptions that we have been talking about for the last couple of weeks. I know that we will have thoughtful conversations during 2019. We just respect the fact that this good work is ongoing, and I will be supporting it. So with that, I'm going, are there any other comments? Okay, with that, I will move adoption of Green Sheet 1-11-1.
Second.
Any further comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes. We'll move on to the next item.
The second item is Green Sheet 14-91, which I will defer to my colleague further down the table for.
Great, thank you.
This green sheet rescinds a green sheet already in the package that has been approved, which is item number 14-9-C1, which, as spoken to during the public comment period, adds funding for a 2% increase to contracts that did not receive general fund support at the Department of Human Services. And this green sheet, by rescinding that, also proposes to, again, give that increase, but with different offsets. In this case, the funding that was just recognized being the principal change.
Good, thank you. Councilmember Mosqueda, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move Amendment 14-9D1, sponsored by myself, Councilmember Johnson O'Brien, with a lot of support from the previous co-sponsors as well.
I'll second. Further comments?
Sure. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Last week, we discussed this budget item in detail, and as you heard from the individuals who testified today, it is critical that we continue to invest in our frontline homeless shelter workers. I committed last Wednesday to working with all of you to identify alternative revenue options to fund the much-needed 2% inflationary adjustment for homeless service workers, and this amendment today fulfills that promise. With the passage of this amendment, City Council's budget can include the modest 2% inflationary adjustment for all contracts for homeless service provider agencies and include the full expansion of the navigation team. I want to say that it's wonderful that there has been support expressed for making sure that our homeless individuals, families get the services they need, and that there's been expressed support for the funding of the positions of the navigation team. And we know that the navigation team can only be successful if they have folks to navigate homeless people to. We know that homeless service providers are literally that individual that gets the warm handoff. They are the staff that help refer the people the navigation team has brought to them to housing and chemical dependency support and making sure that they can get stabilized. These folks who are on the front line and are homeless service providers, they are the staff that can make the navigation team's goals be successful. They are chemical dependency counselors, mental health providers, case managers. They help people find permanent housing, jobs, and food assistance. They are critical to addressing the homelessness crisis. And they help those who have been in shelters stay in shelters instead of falling back into homelessness. So we know that many of the homeless service agencies report that they've been operating with a 30 to 40% turnover rate. And this creates instability at the very time when stability is needed in Seattle to address our homeless service response system. We cannot fail to pay our contracted workers an inflationary adjustment in this expensive city. And as you heard, we just had this same conversation last week with the police contract. This is no different. The reality is that due to these low wages, many shelter workers report often being eligible for the same programs that their clients are eligible for. They sometimes live in their cars, they rely on food banks, they are living on the margins. So I wanted to reiterate those points because I worry that some of that got lost in the narrative of the last few days, and also reiterate that these vacancies, the turnover, the problem that we've experienced over the last decade or so is not a problem created by this mayor or this council. Instead, we all inherited this problem. And today we're taking important steps to address the parity needed to begin a down payment. I want to thank Councilmember O'Brien for his years of work on this, this mayor for including a base that we could build upon, and I want to thank the homeless service shelter workers, the individuals who are from the homeless service provider networks who have been trying to make sure that we bring attention to this for years. We will continue this work, as you heard. This is just the beginning. And the chair, due to her leadership, we are now making significant strides to making sure that we include this in the budget. Thank you again to my esteemed colleagues for your work to make sure that this was included in the balancing package. And I want to preemptively thank all of you for your support. And you know that we're making an incredible down payment today, but so much work to do. Thank you again, and look forward to making sure that this key component, along with the navigation team, have the support that they need into the future.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Councilmember Johnson.
Just briefly, I want to say thank you to Councilmember Mosqueda for working so closely with our office around making sure that the choice in front of us was one that didn't pit these two important priorities against each other. I believe in the value of our nonprofit service providers and the work that they do as somebody who comes out of the nonprofit community. I also believe in the value of the navigation team and their work to exit folks to permanent housing. So I think that this is an elegant solution that allows for us to make sure that we are prioritizing our investments both for those folks who are supporting clients who are homeless and for those who are homeless themselves.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Well, I just also want to acknowledge Councilmember Mosqueda. I'll catch you, Mr. O'Brien, here in just a moment. But we also added a mental health professional to our navigation team in our underlying budget by 1497-A-2. So thanks to all of you for doing that. And again, Councilmember Mosqueda for taking the lead on this. It's been really important. Councilmember O'Brien?
Yeah, I would like to second that. Councilmember Mosqueda, your leadership here has been really amazing. And I want to really thank the advocates in the community who have been educating us for years, frankly, on the growing challenge. And, you know, your work has been noticed for sure. It's been a challenge to address it. I want to acknowledge that what we're doing today is adding a small piece on top of a small piece, and to truly address the challenge in front of us is going to take significantly more work. And the sooner we do the work, the sooner we get better results for the very people we're trying to serve on a whole host of avenues. So I'm proud to be supporting this. I'm proud to working in collaboration with so many folks on this. I think this is something that we should all be proud of, and we can celebrate it for a few minutes, and then we need to focus on the next thing because this is just a small piece of what needs to be done.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right.
Madam Chair, I just want to say thank you to my citywide colleague, Councilmember Gonzalez, for her leadership as well over the last few days in helping to identify a solution.
Great. Thank you for that. Those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet 14-9-D-1, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes, and let's move on to number 3.
Item number 3 is Green Sheet 26-1C1, for which I will turn things over to Asha Venkatraman.
Asha Venkatraman, Council Central Staff. 26-1C1 would add $80,000 in 2019 to the Office of Intergovernmental Relations for supporting a contract for anti-poverty lobbying. It is backed by the first item that you all voted on, 111A1, and it rescinds the green sheet that is currently in the package, 26-1B1, which had placed a proviso on the Office of Intergovernmental Relations existing funds of $88,000 for this purpose.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilmember Johnson, thank you for your sponsorship on this.
Sure. So I just want to remind folks that I think the work that we are trying to accomplish in Olympia this year, both related to the work that the folks at SPAN do, as well as the work of our general contract lobbyists in Olympia, is going to be critical for us as we continue to want to prioritize investments in human services. In addition, certainly the work that our federal lobbyists do are critical for us to get those additional federal dollars that we know we need, and we also know that have been diminishing over the last several decades. The number of folks that are living in extreme poverty in our state has nearly doubled over the last 20 years, despite these periods of economic growth. So I want to make sure that we continue to invest in partners like SPAN. while also making sure that we have the resources that we need both in Olympia and in DC to get our important legislative agenda done. This allows for that, and I'm grateful to Councilmember O'Brien for thinking through a series of strategies with our office to make sure that we are investing in the statewide poverty action network while also making sure we're making appropriate investments in our contract lobbyists to get our legislative agendas done. And with that, I'm happy to move for adoption of Green Sheet 26-1C1.
Thank you. And I will second that. I'm going to call on Councilmember O'Brien.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, thank you for your leadership on this work. I really appreciate that. And I want to just use this as an example of, to thank Budget Chair, Councilmember Bagshaw, and Central staff. We had a really long meeting on Wednesday. We debated a number of issues, and at the end of the day, ended up what I think was an appropriate set of priorities. We had some funding solutions that were imperfect. They're always going to be imperfect, but some were more imperfect than others. And I really appreciate the work that was done between Wednesday and today under your leadership. But I know a lot of folks spent a lot of time over the end of last week and this weekend to pull that together. And this is an example of where I think this is a set of investments that everyone on this dais seems interested in supporting, and finding a better way to fund it makes a lot of sense. And I think that theme is coming through today is really great. So thanks to everyone.
Councilmember Herbold.
Just want to echo my thanks to Councilmember Johnson, O'Brien, and Bagshaw for making sure that this moves forward. I'm really proud that this council, year after year after year, has seen the value of mobilizing low-income people to amplify our voices and promote our state legislative agenda in Olympia. We can't get as much done without these folks doing this work, so thank you.
Good. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, well, I will, it's been moved and seconded, so those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet number 261-C-1, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Councilmember Juarez?
Yes.
Was that an aye for you?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. Unanimous, and we'll move on to number 4. Now, Council, this is going to be something, Council colleagues, I will be moving to substitute, so I just want to alert you to that. So I'm first going to move that we recommend adoption of Green Sheet 14-8-D-1.
Second.
And then, are there any comments? So we're just going into the substitution. We're just voting on the substitution here. Okay, so if there are no comments, what?
No. Voting.
We want people to vote no
Okay.
on this one, boss.
We want to move to substitute now.
So
that it's before us.
we're moving to substitute first. Man. Okay, so there's comments, and I'm now moving that Green Sheet 14-8-E-1 be substituted for Green Sheet 14-8-D-1. So all we're doing is voting on the substitution at this point.
Yes, and the chair may wish to entertain comments on the proposed substitution.
Any comments on the proposed substitution? We're just voting on the substitution piece, and then we'll get into the substance. Okay?
So,
If I may,
Please.
The next vote, if there are no further comments, would be on whether or not to approve the substitution of 14-8E1 in place of 14-8D1, which is currently on the agenda. So if the majority of the council members vote in favor of the motion to substitute, then 14-8D1 would no longer be available for consideration, and 14-8E1, the one that's been handed out and projected on the screen, would take its place on the agenda and would be available to have a motion to adopt and a vote.
All right. Is that clear to everybody? Councilmember O'Brien?
So my suggestion would be that we have a policy discussion on this right now.
Okay.
yes.
In advance of the substitute, and then once we're done with that, we will move swiftly to approve whatever we did.
All right. Councilmember O'Brien, would you like to initiate that?
Maybe Jeff want to start?
Either way.
Councilmember Juarez?
I'm going to let, because we came to a compromise, so I'm going to let Councilmember O'Brien speak first, and then I'll speak. How's that?
Okay. I'm going to keep this short. I think we spent a bunch of time last week on this one. I really want to thank all my colleagues, starting with Councilmember Juarez, on working together on this. I'm going to make sure that I have my understanding of this correctly, because this was coming together in the last few minutes, but central staff, correct me if I'm wrong. What this green sheet would do Currently in the sugary beverage tax revenues, there is, well, in the mayor's budget, there was $269,500 of unallocated revenue. This green sheet would allocate that revenue towards food banks. There is also, in the mayor's proposal, there was $250,000, which was one of the categories to be spent, that would be spent on outreach programs. This money would keep that there, but put a proviso on it so that the committee, and I believe it's the committee that Councilmember Bagshaw and Mosqueda chair, would get a report on what that RFP looks like for outreach before they go out and commit those funds. And my hope would that could happen in a relatively short period of time, because I know they're anxious to move that. And I appreciate the collaboration on this. I want to just state that it's really hard when we're arguing over a host of things that we all agree are good things, and we wish we had more money to do all of them. I stand by this because I think this supports the vision of the Community Advisory Board, who are folks that I recognize as experts on this, recognizing that we are the ultimate policymakers and are going to make some adjustments here, and I think this balances that appropriately.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Warris.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, Chair Bagshaw, for working with us over the weekend, and I want to thank Jeff for providing us all of our charts. And Councilmember Bryan, of course, thank you. I want to just state some basic information. As you all know me, how I am. I'm kind of more about the facts, and then I want to just kind of talk a little bit why I fought so hard and why I believe this is a good compromise. I do appreciate Councilmember Bryan's willingness to dedicate, or to agree to dedicate, $270,000 in surplus funds to the food banks. However, that $270,000 is less than 5% of the $6 million unanticipated surplus. I believe the amount is a meager addition to our food bank safety net, considering the size of the surplus. I believe we can do better. The chair's balancing package originally included $520,000 for food banks. Councilmember O'Brien's proposal is a significant reduction. While I do respect the Community Advisory Board, again, I cannot emphasize it's the Community Advisory Board, and we know as of today that the 16 categories and how the funds were laid out, it's well over $17 million, and we will be anticipating $21,500,000 in the year 2020, and we were only anticipating not spending that money on a media plan for 1 year. It would have been reinstated, or would have been there in 2020. So our budget chair has proposed modifying the proviso to ensure that the media campaign focuses on outreach to low-income, non-English speaking communities, and I do support that modification. And let me just say this, and this is more what I wanted to share last week as well. There's two things I want to be clear about. The $250,000 that was only going to be gone for 1 year, that is 2019, that the Community Advisory Board wanted for an outreach or media program, they initially asked for $16.4 million with no plan in place, and I had concerns about that. And I think in light of what happened, that the Initiative 1634, which passed, we need to know that the beverage folks spent $22 million to pass that initiative. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, in this, with the $250,000 for a media campaign, the question has to be asked, is this money doomed to be wasted? Why are we attempting to counter corporations capable of spending tens of millions of dollars on pro-soda advertisements with a $250,000 campaign? My position is this money should be better spent getting healthy food to those people and children who are hungry today. I'm a big proponent of direct services. And again, please just bear with me, and I'm thankful that my colleagues have been so good to me about letting me share why this is near and dear to me. Of the 16 categories, we know that we have well over $17 million that's going to be spent. And we know that we have 39 food banks. And of those 39, 30 of them are enhanced food banks. And we've talked about what that means, that people go there not just for food, but for shelter and medical and every other social program that we offer. These food banks do that. Of those 30 food banks, 17 of them have contracts with the city, all over the city. And again, I'm a proponent of direct services. I think that this money should be spent to feed those that are hungry today and tonight, and should be spent to shelter those today and tonight. My main goal was to ensure that these enhanced food bank service centers benefited from the $6 million surplus. I originally asked for $1 million, and of course that didn't happen. And on a personal note, the reason why I fight so hard is some of us did grow up hungry. Some of us did grow up without dinner and without breakfast and lived on food stamps. Some of us were homeless, and some of us did have to go to food banks and had that safety net. And for me, that is more important for direct services than handing over $250,000 or what they originally asked for, $1.6 million, for individuals in which there is no plan set for a media campaign. And I will leave it at that.
So any other comments just on the substitution piece? Those in favor of the committee substituting Green Sheet 14-8-E-1 in place of Green Sheet 14-8-D-1, vote aye and raise your hand. Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so now the motion carries and 14-8-E-1 is now before us. Okay, so I very much appreciate. Am I supposed to ask for comments, or can I just start commenting? I very much appreciate Councilmember O'Brien and Councilmember Juarez coming to the table and looking at this compromise. So what we are doing, and Councilmember O'Brien, I just want to correct one thing you said, and that is in the proviso, the report, the RFP will actually come back to the Finance Committee because we have a very specific time. We know when we're scheduled to meet, and we'll do that quickly. And do that as soon as the RFP is available. So I'm supportive of this and just recommend that we move to adopt. Any other comments? Okay, well, I move to adopt Green Sheet 14-8-E-1. I need a second. Second. Any further comments? Okay, those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet 14-8-E-1, vote aye, raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes. Congratulations. I think that is a record for the single green sheet, but let's move on to the next one. Item number 5 on our list.
Item number 5 is Green Sheet 29-2B3. I will turn, I believe, to Lish to describe this in just a moment, but I just want to note that the next 3 items all rescind or basically undo the approval of prior council actions that were similar to these items and replace them with updated or corrected versions. And so,
Lish?
Lish Whitson, Council Central Staff. This is a correction to a previous green sheet. It continues to provide $1 million of community development block grant funding for the Equitable Development Initiative, $1 million of general fund for a youth opportunity center, and places a proviso on the OPCD budget to ensure that at least $5.43 million are available for Equitable Development Initiative grants.
Great, thank you. I will move Green Sheet 29-2-B-3. A second, and are there any comments on this, council members? O'Brien, Harrell, and Herbold, you are, anything else? Okay. Then those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet 29-2-B-3, please raise your hand, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes, please, and let's move on to number 6.
Green Sheet, or rather, item number 6 is Green Sheet 35-23-A-2, and Calvin Chow of our Council Central Staff has come to the table to speak to it.
Great.
Calvin Chow, Council Central Staff. Green Sheet 35-23A2 replaces Green Sheet 35-23A1, which adds $100,000 in SDOT to engage Chinatown and the Pioneer Square neighborhoods on the Sound Transit 3 alignment. The new green sheet does not change the dollar amount or the proviso, but adds some additional language to reflect your discussion on Wednesday around language access and expectations for how the study is provided.
Very good. So I'll move Green Sheet 35-23A2.
Second.
And any comments?
I'll just comment. We had a good discussion on Wednesday on this. Council members Gonzalez and Johnson both had substantive comments about that, and we worked over the last few days to refine some of the language in here. I believe we're in agreement. There's still some work to be done moving forward because, as it states, there'll be ongoing engagement with community members. But I appreciate my colleagues' engagement in this, and I think this language makes sense moving forward.
Very good. Any other comments? I just will acknowledge Councilmember Gonzalez. Thank you for being such an advocate and bringing to the fore that we need to have language access, and appreciate that. I think that that's become a theme throughout this budget. That, I mean, frankly, that we needed to have those reminders. So I'm very pleased to be supporting this. Okay, if no further comments, those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet 35-23A2, please vote aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, excellent. We will move on to number 7.
Item number 7 is Green Sheet 38-8A2. This would redo some of the allocations related to the Seattle Police Officers Guild contract. Greg Doss can tell you more.
Very good.
Greg Doss, Council Central Staff. The green sheet before you, 38-8A2 replaces 38-8A1, which puts into the 19 and 20 budget the amounts that are needed for the SPOG contract that was approved by this body last week. And I will note that the amounts are the same, $40 million in 19 and $50 million in 20. The only change is purely technical among the distributions of the BSLs. We got new information from the City Budget Office, and this green sheet reflects that correction.
Very good. Well, I will move adoption of Green Sheet 38-8A2.
Second.
Councilmember Gonzalez, do you have any comments or like to speak to it?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any further comments? If not, those in, oops, sorry. I'm sorry. Councilmember Sawant.
It's as was stated by Greg, this is just a technical item, so I won't be voting no against it, but I will be abstaining, but I just wanted to explain why I will be abstaining. As you all know, I voted against. I was the sole no vote on the Police Guild contract. And as I explained during my no vote, I am not opposed in any way to the wage increases and improvements in the standards of living for the police officers, but unfortunately that contract came accompanied with a rollback in police accountability, and obviously this item is a question of funding those wage increases that were approved by the rest of the council. But since this is a technical item only in terms of just making adjustments, I will be abstaining on it.
Any further comments? Those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet 38-8A2, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One abstention?
Abstain.
Okay, that motion carries, and this green sheet is adopted, and we can move on to item number 8.
So the next 2 items are green sheets that recommend amendment and adoption of couple pieces of legislation. These are separate from the last 5 items, which are more purely mechanical in nature and have some policy components. And so I will turn for item 8, Green Sheet 12-11A3, to Jeff Sims.
Jeff Sims, Council Central Staff. Item 1211A2, which is already in the package that has been approved, recommends adoption of a resolution. There are some technical changes that are necessary for that resolution, and this new green sheet that's before you, 1211A3, would amend the resolution and then again recommend its adoption just with those technical changes added.
Okay. Very good. I'll move adoption of green sheet 12-11-A-3.
Second.
Okay, any comments? None? All right, those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of green sheet 12-11-A-3, raise your hand, vote aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, please move on to the next item. It passes.
Item 9 is Green Sheet 33-11C1. I will turn to Ketel Freeman.
All right, so Ketel Freeman, Council Central Staff. Green Sheet 3311C1 would rescind Green Sheet 3311B1, which the committee approved last Wednesday. It would recommend amendments to Council Bill 119407 and then recommend that Council Bill 119407 be passed as amended. The amendments currently in Council Bill 119407, which this green sheet would effectuate, represent some compromise language between Councilmember Herbold and SDCI to address some concerns raised by SDCI. Specifically, the amendments would clarify that monitoring inspection under the program would only apply to new development, not to remodels and tenant improvements, and also clarify that all buildings subject to inspection and monitoring under the program could roll off the program after 3 months of clean inspections.
Thank you. I will move adoption of Green Sheet 33-11-C-1. Okay, we have comments. So I'll start with you, Councilmember Herbold, and then Councilmember Johnson, and then me, unless there's somebody else in the queue.
Great. I want to thank the folks who co-sponsored this with me. Budget Chair Bagshaw, Council President Harrell, Councilmember Juarez, Councilmember O'Brien. Back in September 2017, in Council Bill 118971, we passed changes to the vacant building legislation, and contained in that piece of legislation, we had language that said the council intends to consider appropriations and provide guidance for establishment of a strengthened vacant building monitoring program during deliberations on the 2018 budget. This is legislation. Legislation that those of us who were on the council in 2017 voted in favor of. In April, we received recommendations from the Department of Construction and Inspections on how to structure a vacant building monitoring program. We provided some direction about the way we wanted to go in September. We also, in the budget process last year, funded a half-time person at SDCI to specifically work on this. And then, as Keto mentioned earlier, we made some changes in both in Budget Committee last week to extend the period of time for the effective date from what had earlier been March, and we extended it to June. And we made some changes based on a meeting that Keto, Alex, and SDCI director had on Friday to address two items that there still remain some concerns on. I am aware that the budget office still has some remaining concerns, but I'm confident that we can use the time between now and the effective date in June to address those.
Okay. That's a really good point. Councilmember Johnson.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Herbold. I just want to, I don't want to relitigate the conversation that we had last Wednesday, but I just want to go back on record as saying I oppose this piece of legislation. The budget process is not a place where we generally take on large-scale policy issues like this. The fact that, again, amendments were made to this legislation from Friday and brought to us today, I think is a good indication that this kind of work requires additional time, both in committee. I'm still committed to finding that in committee. I'm not expecting to convince my colleagues today to join me in voting no on this, but as we walked out here today at 10:27, we received a couple of page memo from the budget director and the director of the Department of Construction and Inspections that outlines some additional financial and policy issues about concerns that they have with the program. I'm grateful to my colleagues for the extension of the effective date from April 1st to I believe we changed it to either June 1st or July 1st. And I think that extra time will help us to make sure that we find the time and energy in committee to improve this legislation. But I'm going to be voting no today because, again, I think that I have been chided by my colleagues on several occasions for trying to bite off more policy than I could chew during the budget process. And I think this is one of those instances where this required a little extra time and energy in committee, and I hope that we can give it that regardless of the outcome this morning.
Any comments? Councilmember O'Brien.
I'll just add on here, I want to thank both Councilmember Johnson and Herbold for the discussion on this. I will be supporting the legislation as proposed, recognizing the concerns that have been raised. And I want to just be clear that as, to Councilmember Johnson's, your concerns, I agree this is a tricky balancing act. There's some big policy things in here, but I also think there's a sense of urgency. As this comes back to committee, I want to just make sure the directors who sent the letter over this morning know that, as we learn more about policy, I will be very supportive of making amendments as necessary so that we have a program that actually works. But I'll support this today.
Good. I'm in this funny position where, having been a sponsor several weeks ago, I'm now concerned that we continue to hear from the department that we don't have this quite right. I want to acknowledge and say thanks, Councilmember Herbold, for extending the date. I'm just getting a sense from my colleagues that this is undoubtedly or most likely to be moving forward, but I do believe that some of the points that Nathan Torgelson, our director, raised that the 3 FTE will provide less than half the estimated staff hours that we need. And also, I am interested in really signaling we need some help around commercial buildings, the vacant commercial buildings as well. I know that we'll be doing that. I'm going to vote no. Maybe at this point it's more symbolic than actual, but just to send that signal that we need to have more conversation. If this passes, our directors will have to get back to us and work through it by the 1st of June. Councilmember Gonzalez and Council President Harrell.
Excuse me, thank you. I'm going to also not support this bill today. Last week, I signaled that I had concerns about the depth and the complexity of the policy issues that we're being asked to consider in this process. And I think that this council has historically deferred to the chair of the responsible committee when that chair requests additional time to be able to really identify what the right balance might be and to really provide the chair with an opportunity to shepherd through what is clearly an important policy issue. I don't take issue with the fact that we need to have some policy in this space. I'm just a little concerned that we continue to hear from the department and now our city budget office that there are additional concerns related to financial impact and just the implementation of the program. So I'm going to join those voting no on this bill and appreciate Councilmember Johnson's continuing commitment to make sure that we have a better understanding of the complexity of some of these important issues, and look forward to digging into this work in the fall if this bill doesn't pass today.
Okay. Council President Harrell.
Sure. Well, I certainly expressed my earlier support for Councilmember Herbold, and I'm not going to abandon that support now. Get the pun?
Thank you.
Abandoned? Okay. It's early. Okay.
You should have said vacate.
Vacate. Okay. I'm not going to vacate the sport. I recognize in the legislation that, I hear the concerns. I think they're all valid concerns. I've heard during the discussion that because of the timing, we'll have, I think, ample time to work with the department and to gain their feedback and look at if it has to be tweaked, there will be some tweaks. And so I do have a strong appreciation for the point Councilmember Johnson made. So I think there's some flexibility built in. And I think that, quite candidly, by raising the issue as aggressively as you did, that's going to force the issue to hand, and that's why I support it. And these issues of vacant buildings are very significant to a lot of people, and so I think it's going to put a little impetus behind us to move forward. So I continue to support.
Any further comments?
Councilmember Bagshaw, if I may, for the benefit of the public, just some clarity about this particular vote. So the committee approved last week Green Sheet 3311B1, which would be rescinded by this item on the agenda here, 33-11C1. The action from last week recommended passage of Council Bill 119407 in a different form from the one which this would recommend. That's the purpose of this green sheet, of course. But if this green sheet is voted down, there will still be a committee recommendation to approve the legislation in the prior form as it was authorized last week. So the question of the vote here is which form, effectively. Now, that's, to be clear, the council will have the opportunity to not approve the legislation in this afternoon session in whatever form the committee may pass along. But this vote is not about whether or not to recommend the legislation, but simply which form.
Oh, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that very much. Any further comments? Okay, I think we have a...
I'm just confused a little bit. For purposes of moving forward this version, what would the motion be?
The motion would be to approve Green Sheet 33-11C1.
And can you describe what the difference was between B and C? I know we talked about a date change.
I'll defer to Keatle on this.
Okay.
Sure. So the changes in the green sheet that would, in the legislation that would be approved by 3311C1 would be to clarify that buildings that are vacant due to tenant improvement projects and remodeling would not be subject to monitoring under the program, and also to clarify that all buildings monitored under the program could roll off the program after 3 months of clean inspections.
Okay. Councilmember O'Brien.
So, suggesting colleagues, I haven't heard anyone argue that that they want to keep this in place, but think the old version is better than the current version. So I think we should assume the vote on the motion before us is whether we want to move forward at all or not, recognizing that's not what it does. And so if this motion fails, I think we should probably take that as we'll need to make an adjustment to remove it from the bill, assuming the same people that opposed it here want to oppose it there. We don't have the exact vote in front of us for that, but I think that would be, I will be supporting it because I would like either version to succeed. And I think this version is a cleaner version. And so let's see where that lands. And if we're defeated in that, it probably means we need to clean it up.
Conversation. Okay, any further comments? Those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of this Green Sheet 3311C1, vote aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Oops, sorry.
Sally, are you an aye on this?
I think you, yeah, she's nice. She raised it.
Yeah.
Binding.
No, I am.
You said you're going to oppose it.
I am a no on this. Thank you very much. It's funny, I just get used to raising your hand as an example of what to do. Raise your hand.
Okay, so now we're back to the ayes. You want to call it one more time?
Okay.
Give an example.
All right. Vote aye and raise your hand. What do we have for count down there?
Okay, it passes.
Okay. No?
No.
Okay. And no abstentions? All right, so that passes and motion carries, and Green Sheet 3311C1 is adopted.
Which means we don't have any more work to do on this piece
Correct.
this afternoon.
Correct.
That's the good news.
Yeah.
One of the pieces of good news.
Right. More work to be done, but thank you, Councilmember Herbold, Councilmember O'Brien, for bringing this forward. Okay, so now we're on to basic budget legislation, item number 10.
That's right. The next and last 5 items on this agenda are some votes on legislative mechanics of the budget. These would document in various ways the decisions made by the committee and package it in the form of legislation for the full council to consider this afternoon to approve the actual 2019-2020 budget.
Okay, well, I will move adoption of 4116A1.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? No.
No, down on your left.
Oh, good. Thank you, Councilmember Sawant. Thank you.
So we are, my comment right now is in reference to this item, which is item number 10, and also item number 11. These 2 items simply put the mayor's proposed budget on file. When we get to items 12 and 13, we will be voting on the budget as a whole, which is a separate thing. This is simply to put the mayor's proposal to document it for the record. So I will be voting yes on filing these clerk files.
Okay. Any other comments? Those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of this Green Sheet 4116A1, vote aye and raise your hand. Aye?
Aye.
No? Any abstentions? Okay. This motion carries. It's adopted, and please let's move on to the next item.
Item number 11 is Green Sheet 41-17A1. It is similar to the prior item and would file the mayor's proposed CIP.
Okay. I will move adoption of 4117A1.
Second.
Any comments? No comments? Then those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of this Green Sheet 4117A1, vote aye. Raise your hand. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? You got the count? Okay.
Item
So,
12.
I'm sorry. So it is carried. Let's move on to the next one.
Item 12 is Green Sheet 41-10A2, which would amend and then pass as amended Council Bill 119392, which would adopt the 2019 budget.
Good. I will move adoption of 4110A2.
Second.
Okay. Any comments? Councilmember Sawant?
Just like in previous years, unfortunately, this year, again, I intend to vote against the budget as a whole because this austerity budget, once again, falls short of meeting human need in this city and shamefully puts less than 1% of the budget towards affordable housing. In one of the richest cities in the most powerful country in the world, that is simply unacceptable. I will reserve the rest of my comments for the final budget vote at City Council today at 2 p.m.
Any further comments? Oh, Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you. I also want to express the fact that I agree with the sentiment expressed by Councilmember Sawant, but I am optimistic that with Councilmember Mosqueda's statement of legislative intent that we can increase the size of or the amount of housing bonding that we do in the future. We do have a $10 million bond for housing authorized in this legislation. I do not pretend that that is sufficient, but like I said, I'm optimistic that with this council pulling together towards exploring the options to increase bonding, that we can make regular bonding and identifying a regular fund source to pay that off a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilmember Mosqueda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the comments just made by Councilmember Herbold. I also want to reiterate the importance of that future work that we will do. I think we all recognize up here the situation that we are in without having additional revenue, and the ability to potentially bond against the short-term revenue tax could bring upwards of $65 million over the life of the bond to housing programs. We're also going to soon be able to celebrate the work that this council did and the work that we helped to expedite to get over $30 million into the Office of Housing for affordable housing that can be built next year. The reality is we are still underfunded. We know that there's about $270 million worth of projects that could be ready to be built in 2019 if we had the funding. But I think to Councilmember Herbold's point, the inclusion of us being able to bond next year, the funding coming forward from the convention center, and the down payment that was made in this budget, we are making some progress. Obviously, I know this council has repeatedly expressed a desire to do additional revenue, and that will be something I look forward to working with you all in 2019 on. And while I have the mic, I want to thank both chairs, the Chair Bagshaw for your work on this, and Vice Chair to this committee in usual times, Councilmember Gonzalez. I know you spent a lot of time as well on the weekends, and to central staff for all of your work. We will need you as we identify additional funding sources for affordable housing. As you can tell, this is a top priority for me and for this entire council. And we're not satisfied yet, so we'll keep working on it, but I think this is a good first start.
Good. Any further comments? Okay, those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet number 4110A2, say aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries, and this green sheet is adopted. I think we're moving on to the, what?
Item 13.
Penultimate?
Correct. Item 13 is Green Sheet 41-11A2. This would amend and adopt as amended Resolution 31849, which endorses the 2020 budget.
Very good. I will move adoption of 4111A2.
Second.
Okay. Comments? No comments on this one? All right. Those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of 4111A2, vote aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Aye. Opposed? No. And any abstentions? All right. This green sheet 4111A2 carries and is adopted. And so the very last item on this morning's business, Eric, do you want to take this one?
Green Sheet 41-18A1 would approve and file Clerk File 314408, which is the City Council changes to the proposed budget and also the CIP.
Very nice. So I will move adoption of 4118A1.
Second.
Okay. Any comments?
I will be voting yes because this is merely a procedural vote.
Okay. Any other comments? Those in favor of the committee recommending adoption of Green Sheet 4118A1, raise your hand. Say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. This green sheet is adopted. So guess what, everybody? This concludes our agenda. Eric, you got one more thing? No.
Yes, I believe we have one procedural element that is late breaking.
Council members, Ali Pinucci, Council Central Staff. I believe, Chair Bagshaw, you will need to make a motion to suspend the rules to move adoption at today's committee meeting on bills that didn't have unanimous support from the committee.
Okay. Thank you. Well, then I will move to suspend the rules.
That requires second.
Okay.
Second.
And we need a vote on that to suspend the rules, which will allow us to reconsider the items that didn't have unanimous approval.
It will allow you to adopt the pieces of legislation that didn't have unanimous support from the committee at today's full council meeting.
Okay, very good. All those in favor of the motion to suspend the rules, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes. Anything else that we have?
Go Huskies.
Okay, well, that
I'm
concludes.
sitting next to a Coug right here. You
Yeah,
got
no kidding. And somebody else on your left. That includes our agenda for today. Also, I want to recognize it is our last scheduled budget committee meeting for this 2018. Thank you so much, all of you, for participating in this. We reconvene at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and we will consider for adoption the Budget Committee's recommendation for final action. We still will accept written comments between now and then, so also I want to urge anybody who sends us comments to remember that they are public records. So when you say, I would say challenging things to read sometimes, they're still public records with your name on it. So thank you for that. And again, thank you, colleagues, for all your time, attention, and work. And this particular Budget Committee is now adjourned.
All right. Last Budget Committee.